Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
I find it really interesting that the Bible is always saying not to be afraid. And yet, if you read the Bible, it's a pretty scary book. Even for Christians, I think it's scary. And maybe it could be said that it's the non-Christian that's supposed to be most afraid. We see believers and non-believers lining up to go through religious haunted houses. And these places have traumatic scenes in them. You go from room to room to room, and then you're supposed to leave and be kind of freaked out. It's not uncommon for people to emerge, and they're just weird. They're terrified about the world and the devil, the future. And yet Isaiah 41:10 tells the Christian, "Fear not, for I am with you." But if we're honest, and you already know this, under all the love language, it's a horror show. Oh, right now the Christian says, "No, you got it wrong. Seth, my Lord, he's love and light, lives in my heart. He holds my hand and guides my steps, and he turns every moment into a happy Hallmark movie of sweet, sweet destiny. Jesus, God, the same yesterday, today, and forever," which means that he's the same loving God that, torched Sodom, burned everybody to death, and rained down sulfur on human flesh, and shredded children with bears, and killed Job's family after afflicting him with boils, and sent the locusts and the blood rivers and the angel of death to kill babies, and drowned the whole world and created hell. Oh, it's just Jesus. Gets me all choked up to think about the love of God, In the context of Scripture, I think it may make a lot of sense that modern churches have implemented this specific tool designed to scare Satan out of people. And of course, I'm talking about hell houses. These are also known as judgment houses that aren't loaded up with vampires and witches and Freddy Krueger and freaks with chainsaws and that kind of thing. I mean, these are really, they're ideology-driven places. Missions trips, except the missionaries aren't coming to you. You're going into the mission field. Another angle that is taken is that if you can survive the judgment house, you are being tooled up like going to boot camp to fight fear in your lives. I had a listener named Gail tell me about something called the Apocalypse Online, produced by CapernaumStudios.com, and they put a trailer out. Here's what they said.
Now, ultimately, the Apocalypse Experience shows you what happens when you take God out of the society. And it just continues to go down. And you can already see this happening right now. You can see the evil that's running rampant in our society. So the Apocalypse Experience will show you the truth. And it will also help you to learn how to fight fear.
There's a comedian named John Crist. He published this about 3-4 years ago. I don't know the name of the special, but he did a few seconds talking about hell houses.
I think it all went wrong for me in youth group. That's where it all started. Make some noise if you grew up in youth group. Anybody? Or youth group? Yeah. I grew up in youth group. I'm just reminded of it because Halloween just passed. We had to, normal kids would go to, haunted house. We had to go to, Christian haunted house. You ever been to one of these? It's called a judgment house. Yeah, you know what they say? It's like this weird Christian thing where you go to church and then they take you through some scenes and someone dies and then in this drama, and then you go to hell, but it's not really hell. It's like the youth room with the heat turned up. You know what I'm saying? Then you got to go to heaven, but the heaven scene is somehow like creepier than the hell scene. You know what I'm saying? Just a guy in the corner just sitting there with a petting a goat, just... Welcome to heaven.
On a related note, have you noticed how that's the same with Christian movies? Or Christian television, or any kind of Christian media. Whenever they show the devil, it's awesome. Even when it's bad, at least it's interesting. But when they depict God in heaven, if they show God, and they rarely do. When I think of God in the movies, I think of Star Trek V. We have the alien imposter God at the end with the big beard. He looks just like a fluorescent light bulb with a beard on, and he's like, give me what I want. That's what I think of when I think of God depicted in media. But usually it's just gold light and clouds and shit. They're like, oh, and they'll show just some really vacuous, empty, calorie Thomas Kincaid painting, the most boring thing possible, and say, this is what we want. That's where you want to go. This is the interesting place up there. Meanwhile, you and I are like, well, show me more of the devil. Because that's the part where I was engaged. I was interested then. Over here, this looks like just a Yanni concert. I'm out on that. I'm out. There was a woman named Dana, and she did an interview 4 or 5 years ago for the magazine The Cut, and she was talking about her own Hell House experience. These are her words. Dana said, we went several years in a row with my youth group, so I got to know it pretty well. But one year they added a new scene. I don't remember exactly how it started, but I think at the beginning of the scene, you were watching a guy talk to himself or something. And after a couple of minutes of this, it was like they broke the fourth wall. You could hear the cast and crew in the background talking louder and louder, and then people with headsets started to race through the crowd, and they were going, we got to get out of here. Somebody's got a gun. It turned into panic, into pandemonium, and it felt real. This was the late 90s or early 2000s, so after Columbine, and we thought all of this was really happening. I was with my youth group, and I remember my youth pastor tried to get our group to circle up together in the middle of all this and hold hands and pray, like as a protection measure. Which, really, okay, but I remember I couldn't join the group because I just couldn't move. I was stuck. It was like the fight or flight response, but it wasn't either of those really because I was just frozen. I was watching everything like it was in slow motion. And then the room went black and a gun noise went off with a flash. It sounded exactly like somebody had come in and started shooting in the room. People were crouching and people were screaming because we all thought it was real. We all really thought we were going to die. And then it was quiet, and a voice comes on overhead that said something like, what if this was real? Where would you be going, heaven or hell? I still can't believe that really happened. At the time, I wasn't angry or anything. All I felt was relief that I wasn't going to die. I was so active in youth group, and I even went to a Christian high school, like on my church's property. This was my world. But now it's like how shitty to do that to people. You couldn't do it now because of how prevalent gun violence is now. It would be so dangerous, but it was dangerous then, too. Dana is 41 years old today, talking about that experience that really marked her from decades ago. There was a woman named Casey. She's now 33. She was a teenager when she went through one of these places. She said, I vividly remember the abortion scene. Oh my God. I went to so many hell houses year after year, and there was always an abortion scene. It was always a girl in a hospital bed with the sheets soaked in blood. It was so graphic. Blood everywhere. Everywhere. So bloody. you as the audience start to understand that she's had an abortion and it was not done correctly, and she's crying and she was very pale and clearly about to die. I still think about it sometimes. This is a little bit TMI, but about 10 years ago, I was in the bathroom at my restaurant job and I had my period and I was bleeding like an excessive amount. And this substance came out. Who knows what it was? But that brought me back immediately to that scene in the Hell House. Like, am I somehow having an abortion? It was so scary. I'm okay, obviously, but that completely brought back the memory of the Hell House. I thought I was going to bleed to death. There was a 2001 documentary called Hell House that kind of went behind the scenes. It's not a great documentary. It's not all that well produced, but it does have utility in showing you kind of behind the scenes what's going on. And there was a scene or a section where they talked to a mother who had toured an abortion scene with her daughter and then fainted. It's kind of heavy, but here's a clip from that film.
We have here.
Her name is Jan. She's 17 years old. She took the new abortion pill, RU-486, 2 days ago. She's been bleeding ever since this morning, complains of severe abdominal cramps, and her blood pressure is 80/60.
Why won't the bleeding stop? Matt said this wouldn't be a big deal. It was just a stupid pill. Why can't this just be over? It'll never be over, Jan.
Well, we were going through the hospital scene, I guess it was the abortion scene. It just looked really lifelike and real, and I just I got real sick at my stomach and I just started to faint. But I had 2 miscarriages before we had her. She's our miracle baby, and it just was so lifelike that it just brought back some memories to me, and I just passed out. So
you miss a lot with having an audio podcast, but I mean, they wheel this what looks like a 16-year-old girl in. And she's wearing a hospital gown, but all down the front of her and between her legs and down her legs is just blood. They just laid her out, they splayed her legs out, and they poured blood on her, and she's being wheeled out screaming, "Oh God, I thought the pill would make it easy, the day after pill or the Plan B pill or whatever. I thought this would be an easy way to get past my pregnancy, and look what horrors have happened to me." She's obviously both being punished by God and being attacked by the devil. If only she had done it Jesus's way. And you see what I mean about offensive, right? Okay, here's some audio from a Baptist church in Pleasant Grove, Alabama. This was actually investigated by Alabama local news, and they take you through many of the scenarios we've talked about. Their hell house or judgment house has a room, and it's draped in white fabric, and there's a guy, this sort of elderly statesman, gray hair and beard, and he's standing behind a podium, and he's got a great big book in front of him, and people are lining up one at a time in front of the podium. Here's a clip.
After that, we move into the judgment room. Each person's name is called in turn, and they are told that their name is not in the book of life, and therefore they shall be cast into the lake of fire.
Kaylin Braxton, please step forward. Your name is not in the book of life. Please step back.
Then we go to hell.
All of the decisions you have made so far have led you here. My home. Our home. Look around. There is no escape.
Here's a clip from Bula New Life Church. They actually had a promo on YouTube about their 2021 Hell House, and they did the same damn thing. They bring people in, they put them through trauma, and then they've got the devil waiting in the room, which is the entrance to hell. It's bathed in red light and smoke, and they actually had fire machines, so there's fire on the wall. I don't know if the fire marshal knew that they were doing it, and he had the voice changer, so people walk in, and he's waiting. He's so gleeful that he gets to throw them in hell. He's like, ah, ah, ah.
Lucy didn't live her life for God. She didn't accept Jesus when she had the chance. And now she'll spend an eternity without him in hell. It says in the book of Matthew, "Then I will say to those on my left, 'Depart from me, those who are cursed, to the lake of fire, prepared for the devil and his fallen angels.'"
Now, what you can't see in the audio podcast is right next to this preacher woman, there's a dude still acting. He's sitting on a rock, and all around his neck, draping his chest, it must be 50 pounds of chain, metal chain. So he's sitting there just kind of fiddling with his chains and looking all sad and constipated while she's like, "God will say to those on his left, I hope you're covered with the special sauce, 'cause you're going on the grill." Yeah. A few years back, The Guardian sent some reporters, documentarians here, to experience an American hell house. They went to Lynchburg, Virginia. This was one run by Liberty University. Gary Young and Lawrence Topham attended Scaremare and attempted to describe it to their European audiences.
Thousands of people come from not just Virginia, but all over the country to Scaremare, and there are really two components to it. The first is to scare the bejesus out of you. Do I know you? There'll be lots of students who are acting a range of roles that are basically supposed to teach you about mortality, that death is just around the corner and can happen to us every day. And when you're all softened up and freaked out and thinking about questions of life or death, comes the second part, the preaching tent, at which the express aim is to try and save your soul. And when I ask people here, well, what happens if your soul isn't saved, they're very clear: hell and damnation.
The report tried to sum things up at the end of the video with this.
It's difficult to come out of Scaremare and not feel a little bit depressed. It's not just literally dark, it's metaphorically dark, but it seems to work on its own terms. That could be because it reduces the many shades of grey to just a few blacks and whites. Life, death, heaven, and hell.
I hear all the time from people who are not citizens of the United States asking us, what the hell's going on over there? Like the concept of a hell house or a judgment house to somebody in the UK, they're convinced we're all crazy. And I'm not sure they're wrong either. I'm just saying. Now, many in this audience are former religious people who have been through hell houses and even promoted them and brought people to them. Oh, I want to hear their perspectives. Our show continues after this. I am speaking in Knoxville, Tennessee this coming Sunday, the 27th of October. A huge thanks out to my hosts for the event, the Rationalists of East Tennessee, wonderful group, and they've set this whole thing up. It's going to be 1 to 3 in the afternoon on Sunday, the 27th of October at the University of Tennessee Conference Center, and all are welcome. I'm bringing all new material. This is a fresh presentation, and I think you're going to have a really good time if you can make it. I'll see you in Knoxville. Details at sethandrews.com/events. Right now, we continue talking about judgment houses. I've got Katie on the line. Katie, are you there?
I am.
Did you go through one of these things?
I was actually an actor for one of them when I was a teenager.
Well, tell me about it.
So when I was about 16 years old, this was probably roughly the year 2009, this group called Wings of Eagles Outreach came to my youth group, and they represented basically this organization called the 99. And according to them, the 99 stood for a statistical 99 people who die every day from preventable tragedies. And essentially you would walk through it, and there was a drunk driving accident scene with corpses. There was a meth house. There was a gang fight scene where this girl got slut-shamed, murdered, and then dumped behind a trash can. And I often played the dead body behind the trash can. Wow. And there was a death by suicide scene where you basically saw this tape of this girl talking about it was kind of her confession tape about why she was committing suicide. And then you would walk in the room and see this bloodied actress in the next room pretending to be dead. And then you would end up in hell. And basically there was a torture victim in the middle of the room, and Satan was there, and there were demons. And then there was this voice that said, follow the light. And you would go into the next room, and they had scenes from the Passion of the Christ playing behind an actor in the middle of the room pretending to be Jesus. And then when you left, all of these people were waiting to evangelize to you. So that was the gist of it. But the thing that I have found insidious about it in my adulthood, especially as I have gone back and decided to research it a little bit more and see what other people have said about it, and I've watched the newscast that they put out locally when it came to town, they very purposefully made sure that everybody in the general public did not know that it was supposed to be a Christian thing. They marketed it as what they called reality theater, quote unquote. And it was more of almost a Scared Straight, but with theater type of thing, where they were trying to say, see kids, this is what happens when you smoke and drink and da-da-da. But they made sure that the public had no idea that it had anything to do with Christianity. They were trying to be sneaky about it. And I remember specifically when we were getting ready to put on the show, and we were all there early, the organizers of the event would essentially tell all of us, back with our little flip phones at the time, to not take photos or post anything on MySpace, because they didn't want a cross, for example, or any type of Christian paraphernalia to end up in the background of the photo and end up online, because they specifically did not want the public to know that it was Christian.
Katie, did I hear the words MySpace?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So what year? I always thought MySpace was that 20 some years ago? When was this?
Well, it was about 2009. This was roughly the time when MySpace was phasing out a little bit, but people were still using it. Like, more people were going to Facebook, but it was still, I think, kind of before smartphones, or at least before I had one.
Well, I know you're not a psychologist, but do you feel like whenever they put these things on, all these purity types, these upright, upstanding citizen types, the moral, godly types, do you feel like they're secretly getting off on doing all this violent stuff?
Oh, for sure. I've always had, because I was a teenager during the time when bands like Flyleaf and Skillet and all of them were really popular, and they were kind of the edgiest thing that Christians were allowed to consume at the time. And looking back, I definitely feel like there was this feeling of they really enjoyed the darkness of it. They really enjoyed every opportunity to talk about Satan and hell in a very dramatic, poetic kind of, if you ask me, masturbatory way, because that was their only way of expressing their dark side. So I definitely think all of the dark Christian media and the things that dealt with the demonic under the guise of, oh, this is so that we can know how bad it is when you're not with Jesus. I definitely think there was an air of, we're actually doing this because we secretly like it more than we are willing to tell you we like it, if that makes sense.
Totally. Katie, I know you were behind the scenes as an actor. I'm curious. I hear a constant theme. There's, of course, the hell room, there's the abortion room, there's the car wreck room, there's the teen suicide room. Do you know where they got the ideas for these? Is there like a template that churches use, or what do you think?
They didn't specifically tell us, and ours actually didn't have an abortion room.
Okay.
But yeah, they basically went around recruiting people from various youth groups in the area, and I would imagine they were able to fund it through volunteer work and things from the local churches, helping feed the actors and helping keep everybody safe and facilitate the whole thing and all of that type of thing. So they would just show up and say, hey, we have this thing and we're using it to save people, and sign up if you want, that type of thing.
Any thoughts about yourself from 15 years ago? Before we wrap it up here, do you look back and think, wow?
Yeah, I definitely do sometimes, especially when I think about at the time how much I thought it was a good thing and how much I thought it was helping people and showing them the reality of life without Jesus. And now I realize that it was very manipulative and overblown. And it was definitely there to, make sure that people were scared to not be Christians, essentially. And, it almost painted this very dramatic black and white, if you're not with Jesus, then, well, you're probably going to die in a mess house or something,
Well, it sounds like you overcame your fear. You doing okay today?
I am, as much as I can. I have, thankfully, a really awesome, supportive boyfriend who listens to my woes quite often and helps me work through a lot of my religious trauma. And I definitely, thanks in part to people like you who helped open my eyes to the fact that none of it is real.
Hey, we're all in this together, Katie. I think we're all healing as best we can. So thanks for telling us about the behind the scenes thing as we talk about the hell houses and the judgment houses. And I'm glad you're doing well.
Thank you so much.
I've got Stephen on the line. Stephen, are you there?
I am, yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
I actually asked Stephen to give me a call for the show. I had seen a post online about taking a group of atheists through a hell house.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, so this was where and when?
This was St. Louis, Missouri. I want to say around 2007 or 2008. So it's been a minute.
You guys just decided you were going to go tour. Did you tell them that you were atheists or what?
Not so much. So we all kind of drove out there in a few different cars, and we did have like T-shirts on. Hi, I'm an atheist. I forget exactly what they said, but so we weren't hiding it, but we didn't come there to like start a ruckus or anything. But we were just like, if somebody saw the shirt and they said, "Oh, you're an atheist," we were happy to talk about it. And at one point, one of the organizers, the word traveled up, "Oh, there's atheists," and they actually came out. Someone came out and wanted to make sure that we weren't there to cause trouble. Like, you guys are going to be okay. You're not here to start. He's like, no, we just want to experience it. We're okay. And they said, okay, well, as long as you behave yourselves, you're okay to go through.
So give me some examples of what you saw inside the doors.
So they first led us into a house. It was just next to the church. And we went into kind of a living room area and we watched a video, just an old VHS. And it looked like it was made late 80s, early 90s, I want to say, because, the hair, the kind of frizzy hair and the style of clothing. And they were set up in like a black studio room, but they were in like a car. And they were going through this scene and there was an accident. And then this smoke came in and then they're like it was almost like a purgatory kind of thing, but this wasn't a Catholic church. But that was the sense you got, that it's like they're in that space between spaces and some of them are going to heaven and some of them are going to hell. And then from there, we were led out to various different rooms in the church buildings, like if it was kind of a rectory sort of thing. And they had different little vignettes that you would walk through and experience as like a spectator. And they had actors, they had makeup. There was a morgue scene where they were acting out and one girl was like seeing her dead body. There was a hell room that was all done up in black with like orange and red lighting and like the kind of paper mache flames you kind of see like blowing on fans, and they had to jack the heat up was really high, so you're kind of sweating in there. And so there were various different spaces like that, and you see the actors kind of going through. It's like, oh, why did this happen? And I'm not supposed to be dead yet. No, I want to go back, and not me. That a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth, I guess you could say.
So, this is like curiosity. Were you angry? Were you offended? Did you have a reaction?
I think for most of us, we were mostly just amused. I grew up Christian. I left the faith when I was around, my early 20s, 21. We were baptized Catholic, and then my mother started trying out different faiths, like there were salad bars. And by the time I was late teens, I was kind of a deist for a while. And then a couple of Christopher Hitchens, I got exposed to your stuff. Richard Dawkins, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse kind of thing. And by the time I was early 20s, I was pretty much out of it. And I was an angry atheist for a little while because a lot of people are, you feel so betrayed. But by the time this rolled around, I was pretty much just like, oh, it's just, it's funny. But there was a guy in our group. He was a Christian and he would join us at these events from time to time. And he was the most upset. At the end of the tour, it was the altar call kind of thing. And they brought us into rooms inside, like kind of like meeting areas inside the church. And there were different deacons or pastors, elders of the church who were there to sit and witness with people and try to bring them to Christ. And we got the honor of the pastor's son. He's like, yeah, I heard you guys were coming through and I really want to sit down and talk with you guys and, get your impressions of what did you guys think. And me and the rest of the atheists, we were just like, so that was a thing. And I remember I specifically asked him, I was like, do you really think that, is this how you would want to be shown Christ? Like, do you think this is going to resonate with people who are maybe searching or who aren't sure how they feel? And he didn't seem to have a good response to that one. But the Christian in our group, he was livid. He was so upset that they were taking this thing that he loved very dearly. He was from a different faith tradition. But he was like, this is not Christ's love. How could you do this to people? How could you show them these things? Like, what are you doing? And he was getting upset. And his voice was getting elevated. And we're like, calm down. We don't want to get kicked out. But the pastor was a little bit apologetic about that. So I think it was the first time he had heard something like this, either from atheists or maybe more importantly from another Christian. But overall, it was interesting. And it's hard for me to put myself, even then, only maybe 5 or 6 years out of the faith, like, how could I have bought into this? It seems so silly now. And I just remember the feeling I had the most was just, this is all silly, but they take it so seriously. There wasn't even like a positive message of like, heaven is going to be this, and this is why you should want to be in heaven. It was every single scene that we went through was pain and suffering and misery, and this is what you have to look forward to. And, I'd grown up hearing those stories, of course, so they weren't exactly new. But to see it acted out in this way, that was a first for me. And yeah, so I said just bemused, and I felt a little bit sorry for them that this was so impactful for them. It's like the Christian guy in our group, that was the most telling. He was mad that they were twisting in his mind, that they were twisting his faith that way.
I think it's encouraging, actually. It speaks to our values, right? You guys disagreed on theology, but you had shared values. He found it all just wrong-headed and offensive. And so I appreciate that in him. And I think that's the part of the story that you've told I'll probably take with me the most, that there are even believers out there who know this is just bad. This is just a bad idea. Stephen, thanks for sharing your perspective and your story, man.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. This is a great honor for me. Like I said, I've been listening to you for a long time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Here's another personal story. JC was 13 when she went through the hell house. She said, I remember this one scene of a girl killing herself. She was in her bedroom, and there was a little TV on her nightstand. It was supposed to be showing us her memories. And apparently she had been having premarital sex. And there's a pregnancy test on the bed in front of her with a positive sign. And then she kills herself. And I mean, she blew her brains out. The light goes off, a gunshot goes off, and when it comes back on, you could see the blood and brain matter all over, on the wall and the window and the bed sheets. I was terrified. To 13-year-old me, all the blood and everything looked so realistic. That's one positive thing I can say about these things, I guess. The production quality was very good, terrifyingly good. In 2022, FTD Facts did a 10-point feature on hell houses, and one of their segments was talking about how many Christians disagree with the whole thing for a variety of reasons. Here's the segment.
Now, another criticism of these hell houses is the misuse of church funds. Along with those who disagree with the use of hell houses to teach about evil and grace, there are also those like Reverend J.T. Tucker who believe ministries that possess enough money to run a haunted house are misusing their funds. He also thinks the shock of violence in a hell house doesn't stick with the viewer for that long. And anyone who does decide to join the church after being led through one will likely leave as quickly as they joined. He believes that trying to scare people into a decision this big is very wrong. If you consider all the money along with the ministry hours needed to put these events together, if they would simply refocus the time and money on missions and properly educating people, they would have a lot bigger return in terms of gaining new converts.
This was a report by a woman named Vanessa, now in her mid-30s, but she was looking back on her young religious years, and she talked about her own experience. She said, the one that I remember very clearly, it followed one child. I think it was a teenage boy. So as you're going through the hell house, you're following him. but sometimes branching off to follow his girlfriend or his friends or whatever. But all the scenes were interconnected with this one specific person. It all came back to him. He grew up in an abusive home. And in what I think was the very first scene, you heard the abuse going on, his dad being violent and aggressive toward his mom and toward him as well. You could hear it, but you couldn't see it, really. It was all shown in shadows. I remember feeling like that was very scary because I didn't like yelling in my own family. At this point, the boy was younger than I was, and I was only about 10 at the time, and it was terrifying. I'm trying to think, did the dad kill the mom? If not, at the very least, he injured her. And it felt like this was what set him on a bad path. You see him grow up, and now he's a teenager, going to parties, drinking, drugs, having sex. Somehow a school shooting works its way in there too, if I'm remembering correctly. But the message definitely felt like it wasn't so much that the dad was bad, it was that this situation is not okay. It was almost like it was saying that the kid shouldn't have gotten himself into this situation. It just felt very victim blaming. And the whole plot of the Hell House was this kid had to deal with this domestic abuse, which made him turn to these other bad things, these bad life choices. Not being a Christian anymore, I can now say it was pretty fucked up, honestly. Now I'm in grad school for counseling, and it's like you go through these shitty situations in life, and it's pretty understandable if you would turn to substances and things like that. If you're being abused and you're not finding access to anything that's giving you any sort of healing. It went from that domestic violence scene to him drinking with friends. He was a little older then, a teenager. So this leads to the car wreck scene. They took us outside in the parking lot where there was this wrecked car. It was so realistic looking. They must have got a junked car, one that had been in a wreck, and placed it against a tree, but it looked exactly like this car had crashed into a tree. There were a couple police vehicles out there too, and police lights. But what I really remember is all the bodies. It was just bodies hanging halfway out of the car. Blood pouring out of them. There was blood everywhere. I thought about that recently, actually, when I was in my very first car wreck. I'm okay, and my car is okay, but I was hydroplaning for a second, and this scene flashed back to me. It was so graphic. Okay, I'm going to take one more phone call next, and then I want to talk about an angle to the Judgment House that we haven't really covered much of, and that's the tribulation. Not just heaven and hell, but what happens after Jesus arrives, right? He appears in the sky and the trumpet sounds, everybody goes up into heaven, all the believers are raptured, and then Satan is given control of the earth for 7 years, and it's just crazy. It is crazy. Well, there is apparently a Judgment House that's an outdoor walking trail that depicts the tribulation. I want to talk about that in just a second. Repent, my friends, for the day is at hand. The Lord is coming. And he loves you so much that if you don't love him back, he's gonna fuck you up. I mean, I'm just saying, I think that's in the Bible somewhere. It depends on the translation that you use. You got to use the right translation. Let me read this real fast before I go back to the phones. This was published in Religion Dispatches by Lucia Holsether from the article. She said, last week, I partook in Tribulation Trail's brand of Hell House pageantry. And she's speaking about Tribulation Trail in Stockbridge, Georgia. A total of 25,000 participants every October go on a 90-minute walk through the South Georgia woods. We observed intensely violent renditions of standard end-time scenarios, the rapture of believers, an ensuing period of torture and tribulation for the faithless left behind, a climactic battle between Jesus and Satan, and a final judgment in which Jesus orders a teenage church girl to be dragged by demons into hell for, quote, knowing me only in your head and not in your heart. Unsurprisingly, scenes from the tribulation make up the majority of the walk, and the Antichrist had established a totalitarian government after duping the masses with his political charm. Based on the Antichrist's orders, our tour group was being initiated into something called Citizen Change Camp. The main part of our initiation was witnessing the execution and torture of people who refused to denounce their Christian faith. 6 out of 12 total Tribulation Trail scenes involved executions. During one scene, we saw a middle-aged male soldier throw a preteen girl into a coffin and spray her with blank bullets. In another scene, soldiers played by teen boys forced a fellow teen to watch his younger sister beaten to death with a club. In yet another, soldiers executed a girl played by a child who could not have been more than 8 years old in order to pressure her mother into renouncing Christianity. Between scenes, men and teenage boys wearing camouflage and carrying automatic rifles surrounded our group, pointed their guns at us, and herded us to the next station. Along the pathways, we heard the groans of child actors locked up in cages and people begging us for water. What sense can we make of this violence? Of all the things we could be doing on Halloween, why enact scenes of torture? What does this say about the sponsoring church, about U.S. religious culture? I don't pretend to have all the answers to these questions. However, as I drove home, I thought about Joe Bagent, author of Deer Hunting with Jesus, who writes about the political and religious lives of working-class white Americans, i.e. the people that make up the majority of Tribulation Trail's cast and audience. And then the middle part of the article talks about how the subtext of the Tribulation Trail was a commentary on the oppression or persecution of white people. Lucia Hulsether ends her piece by saying this: Tribulation Trail is not solely about managing hypothetical fears of what may happen in end-time scenarios. It's about managing fears about the present and imagining a way out now. This way out is much more than metaphysical. It seems to fit with the material realities of what it's like to be a member of the working class in the U.S. by offering a sense of orientation and self-worth to people who have been demoralized and exploited in almost every possible way. It follows that for progressives to mock something like the Tribulation Trail for being purely misogynist, escapist, or a brainwashing operation by the Christian right plays directly into the hands of those who capitalize off the culture wars by appealing to America's heartland. Right-wing elites do not attend events like the Tribulation Trail unless they're campaigning for political office, but they speak its language and appeal to its values, and then use the momentum they gain to stab its working-class people in the back without losing their votes. Yet, as Bagent writes, it is not far-fetched for a continually exploited group of people to vote for the man who looks strong enough to keep housing values up, to destroy your unseen enemies abroad, and to give God a voice in national affairs. For me, the terrifying part of Tribulation Trail was not the mock executions or the automatic rifles that people constantly pointed at my head. Rather, it was thinking about the context in which all of these things were happening and who would ultimately profit most from this event. Hint, it's not the people who were actually there. So yes, this is scary for all of the reasons you might expect and many more. And you know, that's an interesting angle to it, because Christians, as we know, love to be persecuted. And Christians being or at least they have been a majority class. Certainly white Christians have enjoyed monumental amounts of privilege, and now they're seeing the impending end to their privilege, where they have to equally share this country and this world with other people, people of color, people who are LGBT, people who are of another faith or none. So what do? They say this is all part of the end times. This was all expected, predicted. Jesus Christ said the whole world was going to go to shit before he returned. And all of the things that we are depicting are symptoms of the cancer, the oppression against us, the most privileged demographic in the entire nation. I think that's a worthy angle. I think that's a really good commentary and another layer to the onion when it comes to the Judgment House. I've got Crystal on the line. Crystal, are you with me?
I am.
We're talking about hell houses or judgment houses. What do you have for us today? What's your experience?
It was a hell house, and it was in Sherwood, Arkansas, and this was back in the 90s. I was with a group of people. It was in an abandoned grocery store right by where I live. There was nothing to indicate it was any kind of religious. Now, I mean, it was called Hell House, but I had no idea at that point what Hell House was. And we went in, and nobody in line was even saying anything. It was religious. So we were all just excited for a new supposedly scary haunted house. We went in, and I believe the first exhibit was maybe a car crash, and it was terrible imagery. But then when the preaching started, I immediately, and I was a cultural Christian, but I wasn't a diehard go to church every Sunday Christian. And that was just a little much. It made me very uncomfortable, and I just wanted to leave. Well, the little kids, teenagers, or young adults that were running the place did not want to let me out, and they kept saying the only way out is to move forward. And it got pretty tense. I don't remember a lot, but there was some yelling, and I eventually had to threaten to call the police for them to let me out of the building. And I did not realize how much it really affected me until I've been pondering it over this weekend. And I still do not want to go into a situation unless I know exactly what is going to happen.
Did they tell you why they wouldn't let you leave?
They said they needed you to experience the whole thing I can't remember, something, the bonus is at the end or something like that. I can only imagine it was some kind of mass saving thing, but no, there was no real legitimate reason other than, no, you just need to finish what you started. You can't go backwards. You can only go forward.
Do you feel like, and this is a loaded, maybe a leading question, but do you feel like an experience like this helped to push you out of the faith?
No, absolutely not. That came way later. I never truly believed, but I just always felt like I was bad. And so it was not until after my mom died in 2009 when I was really searching for healing and comfort that I came across God Is Not Great, sitting in a bookstore, and just not in an area where it was supposed to be. It was just right there on the shelf. And I was shocked. I didn't even know we were allowed to have books like that. And I bought that, and that just started the journey. I went from that book to the God Delusion. And really, truly what did it is your book, Deconverted.
Oh, stop. I didn't set you up to say that, Crystal.
I know you did not,
okay.
But I am 100% serious. Reading from your perspective of a true Christian that came out of that is what made it okay for me to be okay, because I always, throughout my life, felt like I was doing something wrong, because that's what I was told. You're not trying hard enough. You're not really inviting God into your heart. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. But I was doing all of those things as a kid and never getting results. And even as an adult, I joined a church in 2004. And that was truly my last foray into any type of organized religion. And it was an awful experience, just like every other church had been an awful experience. And I mean, truly, if I had not read your book, I would probably still be very confused and unsure of myself. I mean, I am still very confused and unsure of myself, but not when it comes to religion and atheism.
That's so sweet of you to say. It's funny when people produce content like this, you know, you always think, I hope it matters. I hope it makes a difference. I hope somebody cares, because otherwise I'm just talking to myself. So that's a huge gift that you've given me. So thank you. Don't you wish Christopher Hitchens would walk through a hell house and give commentary? Would that not be awesome?
Oh my God, yes. Yes, it would. And I wish that he was still with us now. But yes, I really feel the loss of Christopher Hitchens.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And honestly, I'm glad that you left. You know, you decided, hey, I'm going to draw a boundary. I'm done. I'm out. And you didn't let them keep you in. So good on you, Crystal.
Thank you.
I guess there's nothing left to say except hell houses, judgment houses are out there. They're church run. They have an agenda. They freak a lot of people out. They're selling guilt and shame. Be aware, spread the word. There are plenty of other great ways to go out and enjoy a haunted house. And thanks for listening. Thanks to my callers and contributors. And I will catch you next week.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.